Good morning. We're going to talk about white privilege. The article that we were asked to read is White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh. As well as we're going to talk about the movie Single Story, which was a TED Talks. When we were just kind of getting ready, I was bringing up the fact that I think that I can take half and half of a white privilege because, Kristen, what you and I were talking about, how people feel, what I feel like people can do for me is they have a right to ask me what I am. And I know it's out of curiosity because I'm not.
Yeah, they're not trying to.
Yeah, I'm not completely white, but it's just interesting. It's almost like you can kind of feel it coming.
Yeah.
Like, so where'd you grow up? And what do your parents look like? Or it'll be, what are you?
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Because they can see you're not fully a visible minority, but they know that you're not white.
And they're trying to label you because you don't look like this stereotypical white.
And I know that most of the time it's just out of pure curiosity because they'll want to they'll comment on something like your hair color or like your eyes. So I don't think that I can entirely identify with the article that said white men's privilege, but at the same time, I can definitely think of especially in the 1 to 20 list about where I've never had to think about my gender or my race being impacted in the way I go to the bank and ask for a bank statement.
Yeah, and I think also I feel like the half white part of me is definitely more dominant in my life.
And was it the way that you were brought up too?
Yeah, exactly. How I was brought up, I wasn't, my mom doesn't really, she's not very cultural in her own culture, so I didn't really grow up with that, so I feel like I can relate to most of these, if not all of them.
Whereas I can relate to basically all of them because I have had the whole white privilege experience. And I remember growing up, and whenever I had a problem or something, my dad would go, "Oh, well, at least you're a white female born in Canada." And I never understood what he meant by that. I thought he was just trying to make me stop whining.
At the same time, he is building that appreciation in you. That's thankful.
But I never did sort of unpack it and realize what my privileges are until last year I was subletting my place, and when I moved into this place, my landlord was like, "Oh, you don't need any references. We'll take you. You're fine." And I moved in, and I was subletting to an older male who was East Indian, and she was, "Okay, well, we're going to need 3 references from him. I don't know if this is going to work out." And I remember being a little bit shocked. I was like, maybe it's because it's just taking over my rental for 2 months. But thinking about it now, after reading this article, I was like, wow, is it because I'm this white female born in Canada that I look trusting?
But, okay. Well, I was just going to say, but at the same time, you could be asked references because of your age being a college student.
Yeah.
So you look at that, that is privilege maybe on, your looks, in the sense that, being white, but in terms of finances, you totally could be checked because you're...
Exactly. How does she know that I'm going to be able to pay my rent?
Yeah. I was also thinking, what if the opposite was happening? Is there the same kind of double standard in, every culture?
Yeah, if we went overseas, you mean?
Yeah, or if, it was an East Indian family that was renting it out, and there was a white young girl and, a middle-aged man that was East Indian. I'm sure that they would definitely check your references.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like that kind of double standard is everywhere, too.
Absolutely.
Which is interesting, what you were saying about how your mom never, you didn't feel like your culture was very, prominent. It's funny, for me, how would my life be different had I adopted more of, a Chinese culture living in? Because, you, I think I can assume we both have taken more of, a Canadian, North American way of living, but, when I was little, I remember my only childhood memories, aside from being at my white grandparents, were Chinese soap operas and eating everything that my grandparents made, which were like as authentic as they could be.
Exactly.
But I didn't adopt that when I got older.
And I think that's also, you know, growing up in this culture as well, like you kind of start to not like demean it almost, but like, you know, you start to
your second skin and like you're more visible one.
And it's,
you know, you want to fit in with everyone else, but especially when you're growing up.
But at the same time, I feel like unless like you're really holding on to like the foreign culture that like your family brought in, I understand that whole thing. That I remember in grade 5 learning the term melting pot. Canada is a melting pot, and I think maybe it was this article that kind of reminded me that like, can you do anything unless you're really, and it turns, even reflecting what Nella Nelson was saying about like, she's really like, when we have our students who are going to ceremonies, like let them do that and like be, you know, aware of it, but so that way they're retaining their culture, but like.
And I think that is one good way to start breaking down this like white people being so privileged is having others in Canada embrace their culture more and like have it be more of a like look at Canada and all our different cultures around here, and not just like here's our white people, oh, and we have like these small cultures over here, but like really like throw it in and practice it in schools and classrooms or like outside, just like community events and stuff to introduce it to everybody so that you're like breaking down that white privilege and it's everybody's privilege because it is their human rights.
Because it's interesting because I was just like, you kind of start recognizing you're like assimilation happens in such fine ways that you don't realize it's happening. Like to me, it's the way I grew up in Canada, and like my dad grew up in Canada, and so you slowly see little bits of your culture and maybe not seem as important because you're in everyday life, and this is what we're seeing is a white man's world. I don't know. What were some of the numbers, Kristen, that you were talking to us that resonated with you?
Well, to kind of connect it to what we were already talking about, number 15, I'm never asked to speak for all the people of my racial group. So that's, I kind of connected with that in the opposite way, like, you know, because I am half, as soon as people find out I'm Chinese, oh, do you know any Chinese words? Yeah. Like, can you speak Chinese? No, I can't. Like, you know, I feel like people just assume, you know, as soon as they find out something about me.
Yeah, definitely. Steph, what did you think when you read that?
This one here?
Yeah.
I was a little bit like, oh, I don't really get it because I am white. So I feel like I have nothing to say about my culture or race or whatever because it is like so prominent here.
Then I wonder, like in terms of the culture, is that we all immigrated from somewhere.
Yeah.
Like Canada is like the breeding ground of like everything. That like.
So for that, like I could, to that one, all my family is French Canadian. We're all from Quebec, and like yes, I was born back there and lived like the first year of my life there, but then we came out to BC, and everybody's like, oh, so you speak French fluently? No, like I can say bonjour, and that's about it. Like, and it's because my parents, like, yes, they did speak a little bit of French to me when I was younger, but as soon as like I got to an age where I could make my own decisions, they're like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't want to speak French. And then in high school, I was like, I want to take Spanish. And then now I haven't continued with any language. So like I can relate to like having, and when I go back to like back east to see my family, like they're all fluent in French and stuff, and so it's a bit of a divide. Like going to see them, I feel like I don't fit in because when they're talking sometimes I'm just like, I'm sure.
Which is interesting because do you think that it might influence the way that you, like when you're older, do you think you'll develop a love for French, or what about for your children?
I'm planning to go live in Quebec over the summer to learn French because I feel like I missed out on like a big opportunity, like having parents who speak it and coming from a family that's fluent in it. I'm like, wow, I really missed out there. And like thinking about if I'm ever a parent, like I want to raise my kids to be able to speak both because it is a great privileged to be able to be fluent into it.
And in Canada, it's their second language.
Exactly. And I don't know it.
I feel like that also connects a lot with like Indigenous like education as well. Like, you know, how I'm not sure if it was Bella or if it was in another class, where she talked about, you know, you should never ask someone, like a student, assume that they know more than they know about their culture. You know, you just really have no idea because you don't know how they've grown up. Just like, you know, you shouldn't ask people to speak a language that you don't even know if they know.
And honestly, that's something that when she said that, it was like, I hope that I would know that, but I think it was just the reminder that, like, because someone looks a certain way, you don't assume that they identify with that culture, or the language, or are even aware of some of their history.
And I feel like that happens all the time. You know, people just kind of, you know, they forget and they are so tuned into their own curiosity that they don't think about, you know, what can happen to the other person.
I was looking at the number, I have the one about going out shopping alone.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff like that, and going into clothing stores, and it made, like last night when I was at Forever 21 in the change room, there was all these like beautiful girls walking around in their crop tops and like everything showing.
I feel like that should be a
Pardon?
It's winter.
I know.
Yeah.
Aren't you cold? Your belly button's purple. But I was looking at them and I was like, wow, like there is like countries where women cannot show their skin at all. And I feel like very privileged to live in a country where I'm like, if I want to put on that crop top, I can. And like people will be like, wow, she should not be wearing that in winter. But you're not really being judged because like it is all right to show your skin here. And
that's like how it can connect, you know, like if you were someone of that culture and you're going in to buy something in that store, you would be completely offended, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's good to keep in mind for our own classrooms when we do have children coming from everywhere. In terms of, I feel like I need to educate myself more on, and see, I can't even say what religion, but like in terms of like covering your hair, I need to be more aware of that because I may have students in my classroom with that.
Yeah.
And like the reasons behind it.
Yeah, that's a good point. What did you guys think about the single story, the TED Talks we watched on Tuesday?
I thought but she was talking about her roommate. Like just how she treated her at first, and I was like, oh, you've never used like a microwave or stuff like that before. I could see myself as being guilty of that because we have a lady in our church who goes and works in Ghana, and she brought somebody back with her, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're like totally new to all this. They know nothing about like even like for me like the piano that we had there, but they were. Like they had been to Canada before, and even like back in Ghana, they're like, we have this stuff here. It's not all below the poverty line.
Yeah. I was guilty of that when my friend, her sister actually moved to do preschool down. I think, it's Nigeria, so where this woman was from for the video. And he was a computer programmer. Like fully equipped down there. Here in Canada, his credentials don't count, he can't find work. And so her sister is now working for 2 months in Canada, and he can't have a job.
Which is like so many people here too.
Yeah, but back in Nigeria, he's fully equipped doing computer programming. And see, for me, I'm the same way where I'm like, oh, you had this, you can get those qualifications and have a steady job down there.
And they have like Engineers Without Borders down there, and I have a friend who's doing that, and I'm like, what do you do? And it's just like, there's technology out there. And I was like, oh, you feel really bad about that because it's just you have this stereotype.
And I think even especially in primary, when kids are starting to understand the world, we do need what she was saying. What if we had a balance of stories? I think we need to. Yeah. We need to have it the same with Victoria, because Victoria isn't so thinking that we have such a poverty line.
Yeah.
There needs to be balance.
Yeah, and even people in Victoria, they're like, oh, like you guys are like pretty well off living in Victoria, going to university.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, like the TED Talk kind of, you know, having those single stories reinforces like the stereotype
Definitely.
person from like wherever you're thinking of.
I love when she said that we need to start looking at our stories and seeing them as a way of impairing dignity and strength. And I think that for when she was giving the example about Africa, it's like Africa is huge. First of all, you can fit so many United States within it. We need to look at the way that we're representing them and building confidence in them that maybe they feel that us North Americans are like not reinforcing at all.
Yeah, and I feel like that has so much to do with the media and just like, which has to do with everything. I feel like, it reinforces the stereotype. It reinforces like, these pictures of Africa, like the first couple of things we thought of, like African animals, like, on safari, like, like living in huts. That's all we can think about when we hear Africa.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's with every culture. We always have some kind of stigma behind everything.
So maybe even in terms of our own culture, like especially for like French Canadians and Chinese Canadians, we need to look at the culture and the stereotype that we might even hold on to what we think of our families and look into that more about how we represent ourselves. Yeah. Especially being teachers, is our students are gonna, they're out of curiosity, and that's what I mean, how it's not always, I don't want to make it sound like a negative thing when people ask me what you are, but our students for sure are.
Yeah.
And we're the first opportunity to create a multitude of stories.
And I think that's, it really connects with what, what's that?
Lisa McGatta?
Lisa was saying about like, looking at the person individually and like not everyone's story is going to be the same. Like you can have, there was a room full of us and we're all from different cultures, but a lot of them, were like white and we all had different, different stories.
Sometimes even in education, when we so often talk about students, it's funny, like I'm just thinking of this now, but like in the same way that Lisa said, like let's put the human back in the human rights, sometimes we have to remember to put the child back in the student.
Yeah.
And remember that they're all such different little people.
Yeah. And they're children.
Yeah.
There's too many notes everywhere.
But no, I think just this week for me it was just kind of like a hard hitter. Like it was, I just feel like I'm learning so much through.
It really opens your eyes to like even like for me what I see at the grocery store in the lineup. I'm just like, how do I normally think about these people who are around me, and what can I do to change that?
One thing I just want to touch on, because I don't know if you noticed, but this was written in 1988.
I saw that.
And so I was just kind of thinking, like, and we're going to talk about this in our presentation on next week. Just kind of like, do you think this is even still, well, obviously we can kind of consider it still relevant. But I feel like, definitely some things have changed that were in this article. And I feel like, it's slow change, but some change has definitely occurred since this article was written.
Yeah, I read it on the PDF, and so when I saw the type, I forgot to mention that, but it is quite old.
Yeah, but like definitely still prevalent, like, it makes, a lot of it makes sense. But I definitely, I might not agree fully with all of the ones that she came up with, the 26. There was some that I feel like, are starting to change.
That's good.
Which is a good direction.
Yeah. Excited for more.